Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're going to kick things off. It sounds like we've got a fair amount of people joining us today. So thanks, everyone, so much again for coming to our latest AMA. For those who are joining us for the first time, we host these every Friday to talk about upcoming L1 initiatives, things we've been working on, troubleshooting, white papers, pretty much anything that we're releasing on our journey from testnet to betanet to mainnet. And we're so excited to have you with us today. The topic of today's AMA, for those who've been participating in Quest, is the L1 For Unity Toolkit. We are joined today by LAMINA1 SDK and web leads Chris Mahoney and Joel Belgard, and they will be here to talk about the launch of the toolkit, its design and development process thus far, tips for onboarding and engaging with the code package and documentation we dropped on Monday that's also in the chat right now in case people want to check it out live while we're talking. And also, generally just overall the importance of easy to use world building tools in the open metaverse and how this fits into the larger LAMINA1 vision and, how we're aiming to be the chain by creators for creators. So we're also going to be saving a little bit of time at the end here to talk about our SDK strategy as a whole. A couple of key partnerships we're pursuing in the SDK space right now, as well as our next steps for our development and evolution of the toolkit in this space. Because as we kind of noted in the documentation and all of our messaging, this first release is just the beginning, and we're going to be working with the community and you all to further build it out, figure out what you need as developers, trying to link up our blockchain to future experiences and games in the metaverse. And again, super excited to dive in. So I guess to kick off, Mahoney, Joel, for those who aren't familiar with you, I know you've been with us on many previous AMAs, but do you guys want to give a quick introduction on who you guys are, what you do, and what you've been up to with the L1 for Unity Toolkit?
Sure, I can jump first. I am the Unity SDK lead here at LAMINA1. I have been the person behind all of the teaser and deep dive videos that you may have seen. I like to touch Unity and I like to make it do stuff. I've been doing it for about 11 years, and I'm excited to see what I can make it do in the metaverse space. Specifically, there's been kind of a lot of negative response to NFTs and Web3 in the gaming sphere. I think that's because people aren't using it right yet. And I think we can make that different.
Amazing. Thank you, Joel. And Mahoney, do you want to give a quick intro for you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yep, I'm the web lead here at LAMINA1. You guys may remember me from such hits as the NFT Playground, NFT Playground Part 2, NFT Harder. I have had the luxury of working with Joel on various projects, and happy to work with him together here at LAMINA1. If there was anyone that was going to help build a simple to use, professional kind of lightweight SDK, it was going to be Joel, with me kind of pecking around the sides. So so I'm here as a sidekick basically, and more on the Web3 blockchain side of things, kind of the translator to get what Joel need and then get it in the SDK. So thanks everybody for showing up.
Amazing. So yeah, I mean, I definitely want to dive into some questions from the community. So this week, looks like we had over 500 community members who left feedback and questions on the toolkit as part of this week's quests. I also did a quick check, and we are currently rating an 8.1 out of 10 among L1 builders for the toolkit's overall experience and usefulness. So looks like we've got pretty good marks, a little bit of room for improvement, which is kind of exactly where we want to be with this, right? And also an interesting stat here is that only about 27% of our survey respondents say that they're intermediate to expert level with using Unity. Meanwhile, 40% of survey respondents said that they'd never used Unity before, but still were interested in asking us some questions about, what we're up to and what overall, what is an SDK, what is a toolkit. So we're going to be kind of addressing questions on kind of both the, top level, what is an SDK, how does this fit into what we're building at LAMINA1, and then a little bit later on, we'll kind of dive deeper into some of the more hardcore technical questions. So I also wanted to note, as always, before we kick off, that I will be dropping the secret code for this at the end of the session. So you're going to have to listen in. I'll be dropping it in the chat feed, and I'll speak it aloud to everyone. And also I want to note that I forgot to ask for everyone's Discord handles in this latest feedback survey. So all the questions we have this week are anonymous. Sorry about that. Need to remember that a little bit more moving forward. Anyway, question 1, which is a great question to kick us off for Joel and Mahoney, is what is the L1 for Unity Toolkit? And in general, what is an SDK for people who are completely unfamiliar with this side of the metaverse and what we've been building?
Okay, I can jump in with that. So to start with the more broad one, what is an SDK? A software developer kit. It's all the bits and bobs that you need to build something on another platform. That's like the simplest description for it. Most folks would know what that means in terms of like just, it's a term that gets tossed around a lot. But specifically, what is L1 for Unity? This is designed as a very lightweight, very easy to drop in and go connection to LAMINA1 from Unity specifically. There's quite a lot of barriers to get into the Web3 space. There's a lot of mystification and obfuscation, especially on the smart contract side. Well, the primary goal of L1 for Unity is ease of adoption. Here's a simple package that you can install, and all of a sudden you can immediately talk to LAMINA1 blockchain. You can send transactions. You can interact with our example marketplace. You could build your own marketplace if you've got Web3 support behind you. There's documentation for how to take a Solidity contract, turn it into C#, import it into Unity, and then you're off to the races. So this is a bit of a rambling response, but that is the primary what is it for the L1 for Unity Toolkit and SDK.
Yeah,
amazing.
I was just going to call out kind of a lot of the internal discussion we had going back and forth about that real question itself. Like, what is the weight of an SDK versus a tool set? How full feature does something need to be? And we've always come back to getting out of your way as much as possible and helping you do what you're trying to do on the network. So yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's a tool to help you get stuff done.
And why did we decide to build our own L1 for Unity toolkit from scratch? We had some community members kind of point out, we're not the only Unity SDK out there, right? But why build this one specifically for LAMINA1?
That is a secondary point for the lightweightness of it. So there are other SDKs out there. In fact, we're partnering with some of them for LAMINA1 SDK development, but all the SDKs out there are very large. There's quite a lot of setup. There's quite a lot of documentation. There's quite a lot of there's a lot of meat to them, and that, while it's nice to have a lot of features, does increase your startup time. So we wanted a very straightforward approach of like, I just want to get on there and make a game that can use NFTs. I want to be able to transact with a native token on a subnet like right away, like within minutes. And that is why we decided to make our own to, like what Mahoney was saying, get you the most direct, get out of your way, here it works, you can go.
Yeah, and also I would just say the amount of tools that we basically, I think between Joel and I, we've seen probably every single tool set that was out there available for any sort of Web3 interaction in Unity. And since we both come from just classic game dev, we wanted to make sure that we fully understood the pain points, the friction. We certainly experienced it. But yeah, it's really for us to be able to have a firm foundation to start experimenting from a game dev perspective instead of necessarily Web3 folk.
We also got a question in general, why did we select Unity as the sort of first game engine we wrote an SDK for? Why not choose something like Unreal, for example? Were there any kind of particular criteria motivating your guys' choice?
A lot of our early access folks and our community members are interested or already using Unity. So that was a primary decision factor. But also, we are going to be doing Unreal as well. They will both be supported in the long run. We picked Unity first because that's what the folks we've got are going for.
Yep. And also, I mean, Joel and I have kind of a wealth of experience with interacting with APIs from within Unity game environments across all platforms, um, you know, across the board. So, you know, Unreal and other game engine support will look very similar, but just sheer in terms of development community size was kind of a no-brainer. We are thinking of you Unreal Dev.
Great. Now I want to kind of move into more of like the large capital WY on why we built this. So one of our community members asked, what is the biggest challenge you think developers face when making Web3 games? And what does the L1 for Unity SDK do or will do to address that? I know that like this was a huge focus of your guys' development process when you were building this thing, right?
Okay, so biggest
What are
there are
those pain points? Yeah.
there's a lot of them. Just getting just the wallet login is a big pain point. Like, how do I even talk to or connect a wallet to a game? That was like the very biggest and first hurdle right off the bat. And so we had a couple of solutions for that. Actually, in fact, the very next version of the tool set, I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself here, is going to have an even better solution for that. But I think that's probably the first and foremost hurdle of jumping over is just how mystified and obfuscated the Web3 space is. Where do you even start? And so that's where we started with how do you start?
Yeah, big time. And especially because Web3 tooling that is kind of fleshed out in terms of, MetaMask Chrome extension that you have when you connect to, say, an OpenSea or something. Those are kind of battle hardened web-based tools, and the analogs to those within a game engine environment might not be well maintained. They might be any state of development or lack thereof. And so, really, what you need is a dependable base that, Lamina1 maintains themselves with the community and ensures that, even though the tool does what you need right now, it won't fall behind as things evolve in terms of new NFT standards and other exciting things coming down the pipe.
Sort of related to the question around challenges, we got another question in this week that asked, what are some of the challenges that you, Mahoney, and Joel faced during the development of this toolkit? So obviously you guys are kind of talking about addressing the issues that creators had, but did you guys run into any kind of sticky points while building out the toolkit itself that you can share with the community?
We did run into one quandary involving NFT standards. I think it was the 721 standards.
Yep.
Where the way they want them to be done just doesn't make a lot of sense for most games. And so we took a lot of efforts to try and make that work. And then we have the 1155s as well. We experimented with that until we got a kind of a data set that works really nicely with the way that I like to do data modeling in games. But that was a big one, is like, wait, NFTs are like this? How does anyone use these things?
Yeah, that was one of the hugest, after we decided kind of what the baseline requirements we would need were. I think Joel and I both came into like the back door behind the curtain of ERC 721 and understood that it's basically a key value store for traits and a single image URL, right? And so if you're trying to create an NFT that's representing your avatar or even an entire game with a set of properties associated with your game, currencies, ERC20 tokens, bundled multiple ERC 721s if you're going to use them. 1155 allows for all of that. In the smart contracts that we actually wrote, to support the subnet demo use those for that purpose. You can take a very rich JSON piece of data from your game, serialize it out, and those become the properties of your NFT. The challenge is those new NFT standards like 1155 are going to be adopted slowly, where game developers may not know they exist, and they're actually critical to creating anything that's worth putting your time and effort into. So definitely check out 1155s and our subnet demo to get an idea of what we had to struggle with to get there. It was fun though.
It's always fun. I feel like whenever we kind of talk about the challenges that you guys are, it really just reinforces just like how early we are in building so many of these tools. And while that's exciting, it can also be like really frustrating. Speaking of frustration, another question we got, this is actually a huge question that we've got from across the community. As I mentioned, like a lot of our core community are Unity beginners. We've got a couple of experts and intermediate people, but we've got a lot of people who are learning with us on this journey, right? So a lot of folks are asking, how user-friendly is the L1 for Unity toolkit for developers who are new to working with L1 and Unity? And are there any sort of like resources or tutorials that you guys would recommend for folks trying to get started and learn with us?
Well, yes. Well, first of all, there's the videos that I've cut as well. Those are the start. But the toolset was designed for people who already know Unity. So if Unity is not already a strong point, I think there's a vast amount of actually really good resources in just learning Unity itself from Unity. But given that so many of our folks are new, that does kind of inspire me to make more specific tutorials for getting things up and running. And I'm kind of excited to do a little bit of that in the coming weeks. I do like to cut videos, so I think that may be a pretty good direction for us to go. I'm not
Yeah,
saying what specifically, but I probably will cut some more beginner-oriented tutorials for that.
I think it would be great. Kind of, and I've talked about this internally for a while, but to get ourselves some FaceTime up on YouTube or kind of Joel and Chris Hour, and actually just go through and build a super simple game um, in a few chapters. That's pretty much how I learned from any of the tutorials in general that I had to watch and rewatch. But there are a few good ones out there. Maybe we'll include some links. I know there's one or two that really just made things click for me, not being familiar with Web3. So yeah, let's just create fun stuff. Cool.
Yeah, I think we're always like trying to think of how can we balance like helping out the community with all of the stuff we're developing. But yeah, I mean, I would personally love to have you guys up and showing some FaceTime and diving deep in the future. So I will definitely hold you guys to that. And I know that a bunch of our community members probably will as well.
Please.
Now, I wanted to dive into a couple of more in-depth questions about the toolkit itself. So these are for some of our more, intermediate and advanced users who have really dived into the toolkit and have started like testing around. So someone asked, can the LAMINA1 Unity SDK realize the interaction between different wallets and different tokens currently in its state?
Oh, that's an easy one. Yeah, it certainly can. You can connect to any wallet you want. You can just put in your credentials and it will put that wallet in there. And if you're connecting to a subnet, it will see what the subnet's native token is and show you your balance for that particular token straight away. There's support for subnets in there as one of the major features. And I don't know whether I covered this explicitly in my video, but it will definitely be covered in the next one if I didn't. We have scriptable objects that represent subnet data. And so you drop all the subnet data in, you obviously need to have one already made, of course. But if the Web3 side of it's done, the Unity integration is very, very easy. You make a scriptable object, you put in all the data for your subnet, you label the subnet's native token, and then it will just appear in the dropdown for what network you want to connect to when you go through the connection process. So yeah, all that's good to go.
Awesome. We also had a question, and this is kind of like a point of clarification I know that we wanted to make. We ran through the question list yesterday, but someone asked, can you tell me more about safe mode? What's that about and why is it appearing on my screen?
Oh, that's almost certainly a compiler error. So there are two very important dependencies for the toolkit, those being Newtonsoft JSON and unit task, both of which are covered in the documentation. And if that step is skipped, you will almost certainly end up in safe mode in Unity because it won't compile properly. So make sure those two steps are completed, and you can do it even after you've seen that safe mode error message through the package manager. Both of the links for how to install those are in the documentation, but that's almost certainly why you're seeing that.
Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
super
just
good point.
posted a. Sorry,
Ooh, go ahead.
I posted a link in the chat to directly where in the docs it specifies what those two requirements are in the install links. So
That's a
yep,
good
safe mode.
troubleshooting note for our moderators for sure. So definitely happy to
Yeah.
have this kind of down. Yeah. I might spring you guys a question that Jacko Girl just left in the chat. And she's actually asking, she's noticed clearly while poking around in the SDK that there are kind of different tokens, right? So there's the L1 token, and then there's these kind of special subnet tokens that you guys spun up for the L1 for Unity Toolkit. So would love for you guys, if you're willing, to just kind of go into, why make that delineation? How were they related? What was the purpose of that?
Mm-hmm.
The purpose for subnets having their own tokens, this is so that if you want to make a game on a subnet, you can control your economy. You have the freedom to make your native currency as rare or as plentiful as it is relevant for that game to function, for that game's particular economy. That's, I think, the biggest reason for it.
Yeah, and I'll come in from kind of the uh, learn, translate to Joel commit. So a subnet is basically your own EVM blockchain running as part of the primary LAMINA1 network. So the native token is L1. When you have access to a subnet, the SDK subnet is the only one currently. You have a native token just like L1, but it is specified when you create the subnet what the token symbol is, how you distribute it, and some of those things might be those are more tokenomics questions for other folks in future discussions. But especially with 1155s, which I wanted to explore kind of in a tutorial, is you can have non-native ERC20 tokens as well. And so kind of in a game where you have gold and silver, platinum, right? And you have a sword and an axe as items. Those gold, silver, platinum can have their own intrinsic value in, say, that specific game that you build. But the relation to the actual primary native token on your subnet is an interesting thing that I want to explore because it means you could have multiple currencies as a development shop versus also specific to games based on how you structure smart contracts. So that's why there's non L1 tokens, and I'm glad, of course, Jackal found it. Digging more into that subnet demo, and my tip for anybody that wants to level up in Unity is check out Joel's pattern of using scriptable objects to hold data. And you might find it's a much easier way for you to configure game instead of having kind of properties all over scripts and so on. Specifically the subnet data and what the what else is in there, Joel? That
There's
pattern
address data as well. Yeah, address data. So if you've got specific contracts at specific addresses, I've got a little address data collection that will say, hey, you can just plug and play, like, oh, I'm just going to go fetch these all, and you can then give them readable labels rather than some long crypto address. You can say this is the marketplace address, and it's just named marketplace address, and so it goes and looks up the actual information from the scriptable object and plugs it in for you. So yeah, I use scriptable objects everywhere. They're just great.
And I never used to, and it's one of the things that made a major difference in just Unity development in general for me. I started just naturally using that pattern in a couple of indie games that I'm working on. So that's my tip for the day about the SDK.
Yeah, and just as like a heads up for the community, we definitely do have upcoming AMAs coming for validation. We're going to have some upcoming AMAs on subnets as we're sort of making the transition from testnet to betanet. Obviously, the way we validate is going to change. The way we interact with subnets is going to evolve as subnet functionality really comes online with betanet. So definitely stay tuned for more on that. We're going to be deep diving over the next couple of weeks on that, just as a little show of my hand on what's coming through the pipeline for you guys. But I do want to keep us focused on the Unity SDK. And so I definitely wanted to end with some questions around, what's next for our strategy and SDK rollout plan. So I have a question that asks, could you provide some examples of innovative and creative use cases for the L1 For Unity Toolkit you'd like to see from the community moving forward? So, I mean, Joel and Chris, now that this is out in the world, how do you want people kind of interacting with it? What are you looking for people to do? What would you love for people to do with it?
So my hope is for folks to take a look at the Space Lasers demo and come up with different use cases for something kind of similar. The whole point of that demo is I wanted to create cosmetics that were NFT based because I think that's a good use for NFTs. So gradients was my idea. Like a gradient is literally just a bunch of numbers organized in a particular way. And that's very, very easy to store and transfer and recompile into gradient data. So I'd love to see what somebody else could do with those very same NFTs, like make gradient data or use the ones that I've made in the same sort of style, the same data model. And how could you use gradient data to drive gameplay or cosmetics in a totally different experience? That would be pretty exciting. Similarly, the same sort of pipeline of what's easy data to transmit? Like what's a clever usage of just numbers really to drive a gameplay experience. I want to see more NFT games and Web3 games move away from buy the sword is really good and into this is an experience of this game that's fun to interact with, not just buying power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say on the flip side as well, yeah, that gradient data, we were originally talking about the subnet demo. Okay, so we're going to have these three lasers. And the first thing I thought was, okay, so the NFT is going to be the laser. And I think Joel turning it on its head and only creating the gradient data, the raw data, that's also the same for Photoshop. It's the same for Unreal Engine gradients. You have color stops and you have alpha stops, right? And so instead of us just creating the laser item, the best example Joel came up with right away is you could put that gradient data in your avatar's hair, and then it goes from being just a cosmetic effect in a 2D shoot 'em up game to a whole kind of hairdo wardrobe, And,
You could even use it to drive, and this is technically what I did, to drive Unity shuriken particle effects in a
oh
totally
yeah,
different experience. So like if you've got a sword in another game and it's got an aura of purple fire on it, and you use the gradient NFT to change the purple fire to like a blue to teal radiant, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. I think I think it lends itself very well to what an NFT ought to be.
it would be amazing to see someone build an NFT that completely drives the particle system. That would be out of control, and I would start making some crazy particles. So it's really just giving you examples of um, building blocks that can stack up into things that are relevant to whatever you're trying to create. I would like to say I want to see a departure from what's classically called music NFTs. I love the scene. I have several friends, really close colleagues that um, uh, create music NFTs and operate in that scene. I'd like to see more musicians that are unfamiliar with the standards and kind of exchanges and how that works, and see how they could incorporate their own art directly into a game via an NFT that has maybe a link to your Bandcamp album, right? Or some other piece of work of art, pulling that in directly, not as something that you would go sell on an exchange necessarily, but a gallery of actual paintings that you've done. Scan them, put them up on IPFS, create an NFT, and load it up in a scene with an art gallery from the asset store. That sort of thing. I'd really like to see how creative people get.
Amazing. Just a couple of quick and easy prompts from Joel and Mahoney, but I think just as another sort of community call out, we have a new channel under L1 Initiatives that is L1 for Unity that I set up for everyone to just continue kind of like sharing questions, feedback, as well as, if you are working on a project or an experience or another sort of demo that takes, what Joel has created with the Space Lasers demo that we have included within the documentation and links, and kind of want to share it or troubleshoot it with the community, there is now an official space and channel for us to continue doing that. And I know Joel and Mahoney will be checking in on that. I'll make sure to flag them if anything interesting comes through. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that we have a place after this AMA so that we can kind of keep sharing that stuff.
Excellent.
Yeah. Next up, someone asks, are there any plans for future updates or features in the toolkit? And what can users expect in upcoming releases? So again, this is just kind of the beginning. So where are you guys headed next?
Well, that's excellent because we plan to keep the Unity toolkit in parity with the LAMINA1 blockchain. That's the idea, right? We're going to be the first to update with any new features that LAMINA1 provides. And the very next one is Web3 auth for login. Right now, we have login with private key, which obviously is a risk for folks. So I have the little warning on there that says, make sure you use a test wallet for this, because you're putting in you're essentially making it custodial. So the next one is allowing Web3 auth to allow you to log in with any of your normal social media like Google, LinkedIn, Apple ID, what have you. So both of them will be supported. So you can still log in with private key if you just have a LAMINA1 wallet that you specifically use for this. You just drop your private key in and you're off to the races. Or you can log in through any of those social medias.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, what I had been searching for from the very beginning. This is kind of a journey that's transition from building some of the network building web resources coming in to build a Unity SDK. And the one thing I was always looking for was the solution to be able to authenticate somebody that's trying to connect their wallet to a Unity experience. But 3auth, I feel like, kind of came at just the right time. I mean, I had looked at it previously, and it was a lot different. It's come a long way, and it does feel very natural compared to other social login mechanisms. But you'll also have the ability to log in passwordless with an email, for instance, and I believe that sends you a link. Um, so yeah, Web3 auth has always been great on the website, but it's the solution that I've seen that matches the level of quality I expect in the game engine. So
And it
that'll
is
be
what
real.
we're using on the website as well. So now our web and Unity are in parity with with the authentication, which is nice.
Yeah, and as a web and Unity dev, that has been number one requirement just for me personally, is both of those things needed to be running um, under the same foundation. So I'm excited um, to introduce how seamless that is, and reduce a lot of friction for people um, trying to get people to play their game.
Another question for you guys. So, how does the L1 for Unity Toolkit handle interoperability with other components of the LAMINA1 ecosystem, such as, decentralized identity or tokenization?
That is a big feature for Lamina1 in general, and since we're waiting on the major feature, it's not yet in the toolkit, but as soon as that is a major feature of Lamina1, as soon as that's out, we will, of course, incorporate it into L1 for Unity.
Yep. Yeah, that's also one of the major reasons for having created this lightweight overlay. That when it comes down to it, you're basically connecting to an RPC URL for the blockchain. You're transacting as you normally would. But the ability to track in parallel game engine and web development against the network directly, based on the features that we know are coming to the network, helps us inform you on these AMAs as those features are going to come. Helps us get good feedback for what should be features that we might not be looking at. But yeah, you can't really do that with a generic tool necessarily without a lot more work.
And for our last question, we're gonna hop off here at around noon, and I've got a couple of announcements and calls to action for you guys. But I know we kind of already talked about this on the top, Joel and Mahoney, but someone asked, is this the only Unity toolkit L1 will have on its platform, or are you also looking for other solutions, SDKs, game engine partnerships? Do you want to talk a little bit more about the sort of like SDK ecosystem that we're currently building on for Lamina1?
We absolutely do want other SDKs to partner with us. As mentioned
Mhm.
earlier, the purpose of the L1 for Unity is to be the lightest weight, quickest solution. It is not the most full-featured set, because we wanted it to not bog you down in any way. Like you just plug it in and you're ready to go. That doesn't mean that we don't want the other ones there as well, though, because if you have a very particular need that L1 for Unity doesn't meet, some of our SDK partners almost certainly will. They have a little bit of a longer setup time, but the goal here is when you want to build on Lamina1, we're going to direct you to the tool that is most effective to do what you want to do. And if it's quick and you want to just do something simple or direct on the chain, then if speed is of the essence to you, then we'll recommend L1 for Unity. If you need a very specific tool, we will direct you to the SDK partner that is the most appropriate to meet those needs.
Yeah, and as like a quick flag, a couple of the partners that we've announced so far partnerships with in the SDK space include Open Meta and their Emergence SDK. Those are the kind of Crucible folks. And then we also have an announced integration that we're working together with Beamable. So again, those are kind of two that we've announced publicly so far, but we're going to keep building and also adding on not just Unity, but Unreal. And I'm sure you guys have some other plans down the line once we cross those bridges, but a lot of work coming up moving forward. Super excited to continue with you guys.
Mhm.
All right. Well, it is 11:55, and again, I've got a couple of quick community announcements. Joel, Chris, thank you so much again for joining. Again, we're going to have some more tutorials and more updates and stuff coming out about the L1 for Unity toolkit as Lamina1 development progresses. In the meantime, the feedback form is still live. Feel free to fill that out anytime. We also have the new L1 for Unity channel where you can also kind of drop feedback, troubleshooting tips, all of that stuff for us to look at. And for any community member, we got a couple of community members who are like, I wish I had more time to dive into the toolkit before, being asked to provide feedback. We know it's quite a bit of stuff, but again, this week was just kind of the launch kickoff. We'll be continuing to develop together. So again, any feedback or information that you want to share with us, our doors are always open and we're always looking for feedback. Also, as mentioned in the announcement, just as an FYI, this is our final technical release of testnet. So I know I've been hinting it on the general and announcements channel, but our engineering team is super heads down hard at work in putting the finishing touches on the L1 BetaNet and a really interesting new onboarding flow and sort of, we're calling it a hub that you'll be able to kind of engage with the new phase of LAMINA1 for. So I will be giving you all updates on when to expect that drop, the wrap of testnet and all of that stuff as soon as I get the green light. We're still kind of sorting out internal details as we speak, but we are so excited, and I think you guys will all kind of see a lot of the feedback that you gave us during testnet and that first phase of the LAMINA1 wallet are like directly reflected in some of the releases that we're having that are about to come out. So thank you all so much for participating. Again, we are listening, we are taking all of your feedback, and it's really awesome to be building with all of you. In the meantime, stay active, hit us up on all of our targeted channels, and also catch up on as many quests as you can on Zealy. I'm going to drop our secret code now in the chat. It is L1 For Unity AMA with a bunch of exclamation points in it. So that is our secret code for this week. You can go into lamina1.zealy.io and plug that in. You'll get 100 XP for that. And as we kind of said, every AMA that you attend, every interest group that you engage in, we're tracking that, and we're keeping an eye on it, and we're making sure that we are able to know who the community members are who are helping us out, and we definitely have some really exciting things planned for you all down the road. So stick with us. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you all next week for next week's AMA.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
coming.
you guys.
It's a fun time. Later, guys.
Take care.